Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, November 16th. As I was listening to the music here and thinking about what it would be like if I was to not play a game like Shadowverse while just talking about the video game news and new games that came out on Steam, it did occur to me that then the audio would be very silent. Like, it would just be whenever I paused, there would be silence with nothing in the background. It would be very abrupt and disconcerting, I think, to most people's ears. But on the other hand, it had never occurred to me that maybe I'm a little bit like over multitasking for a lot of people too. Like that would be an interesting excuse to not blame like my just poor quality as far as a content creator on me and just say, you know what, maybe I just play too much audio and too many visuals, and maybe this as a stream, doing the video game news and all, bounces around for too many people, uh, and maybe there is just a subconscious uh, element there. Like, I have noticed in my old age that when running into people who bounce around all over the place, uh, people with like ADD or what you would call ADD or ADHD, they do tend to seem to become annoying to me. But maybe at a certain level, I am just higher as far as how much I can tolerate as far as multitasking than the average viewer. I don't know how you fix that. That's just a thought that immediately popped into my head. Um, but yeah, on one hand, if you don't want to bounce around, then you either have to get rid of playing uh, Shadowverse now, not Hearthstone anymore, and just get rid of playing Shadowverse altogether, or get rid of talking about the news, or get rid of talking about new video games on Steam. And if you got rid of one of those two things, uh, the last two things, you probably I made some progress off screen. I actually did play one day off screen just to make sure I got all of the animated cards, um, and that allowed several characters to level up, which does kind of go to show that there's still a lot of room for progression here. Forest Craft and Portal Craft. Let's go ahead and replace this one. I hope that doesn't screw us over. Swordcraft and Havencraft. Um, let's see. Are we at this moment doing any solo missions or arena missions? No. Interesting. So let's just buy a pack to keep momentum going, and then we can jump right into the game. Yeah, we are making momentum as far as how much gold we have. We are making momentum as far as sitting on packs for the newest expansion to get the new cards when that mid expansion happens. Well, that looked like a very nice draw. Let's double up on that, since that seemed to be successful. Let's not go out on a victory. Let's always go out on a loss when it comes to these gotcha gambling mechanics, because you never know. There might be some glitch in the servers determining what cards you get that would just let you open 10, 20 packs, maybe 100 packs, and get really high quality cards. Even if it was a glitch that gave you a high quality card that was just the exact same card over and over again, that would be super useful, because you could then liquefy it and get a lot of vials. Which, let's see, we opened 2 packs. I've forgotten how many cards are in the pack. I think it's 8, so 16. We must have had some extra ones, clearly, that we hadn't liquefied before. It's funny that they show you that final screen again when it really doesn't need to happen. It would be nice if there was a like animated different experience there. Alright, well, we know Swordcraft is one of them, so let's jump into that. For the accountability section, I finished the game The Watchmaker. It's not worth playing. Honestly, if anything, it just taught me that I shouldn't buy mixed reviewed games. I shouldn't overvote people, clearly, because like I know I bought The Watchmaker because I saw the visuals on it in the screenshots and said, this does look like something I want to play. But in practicality, from people who actually played the game, they clearly knew more than I did as far as just how terrible the quality is. In a weird way, The Watchmaker is an attempt at making a 3D platformer like Alice Madness Returns, and the middle level, which is by far the biggest level, is straight up just a direct ripoff of Alice Madness Returns in that it's an Alice in Wonderland theme, where the other levels are less obviously so ripoffs of Alice Madness Returns. But even American McGee's company really only succeeds at making a 3D platformer as big as Alice Madness Returns is, which honestly not even that big of a game, because they had like funding behind it and a big AAA publisher funding them. Clearly, in the case of The Watchmaker, there was no funding and bad allocation of the funds that they did have, which were clearly minimal. I should have looked at which death action did what.
Now furious.
Yeah, that probably was the right move. But yeah, The Watchmaker is not a good game. Not something I'd recommend to anybody to play. The writing and dialogue is particularly awful. The story is particularly simplistic. The platforming's terrible. The use of the time manipulation powers that you have are severely underused. The fighting mechanism with the bosses are terribly programmed and not explained at all. But it's kind of hard to have, as a video game critic, a lot to say about a bad game. Like, you can certainly try to be a YouTuber and feign like disgust and frustration, but honestly, The Watchmaker didn't even inspire that much passion as far as being a bad game. Yeah, there's just not really anything to say there. So then I went from playing that game to starting with 1 hour and 40-minute long episode of Disgaea PC, which is a Japanese RPG. It's a tactical placement RPG game. Just going through the basics. And I'm gonna try and put in some extra time and play Disgaea PC, Disgaea 1, since there's like 6 games there. And we'll see how far I can get in that and how quickly I can just run through a game like that. Because it in particular, Disgaea feels like a game where you could grind a lot, but you may not really need to. So you might be in a much better position to not play that way, and instead just rush through the story. I think that there's kind of a significant difference between how long the beat says to play the main story, which is 45 hours for Disgaea, and how to do all the extras, which is like an hour, 120 hours. So you're talking 3 times as long, and being a completionist seems to be around 200 hours, and who knows what the differences are between those 3 different ways to play. And then of course I once again was working on my server somewhat. I finally figured out how to get to trigger a script when a SSH connection is disconnected, or when you actually use the exit command to disconnect. SSH has 2 different ways you can disconnect. You can either type in exit, which will disconnect you, or you can just disconnect using whatever application you've got. So that requires you to use a function called trap, and then look for specific signals that, depending on what version of Linux or Unix you're using, will return different kinds of signals. So there's one called like int for interrupt, there's one called quit, there's one called exit, there's one called signal h up as in hang up. But then also sometimes, depending on how you're typing the command, you might need to use a different program called no h up, no hang up. Of course, in computers, hanging up might mean disconnecting a connection, or it might just mean that the process is hung and it's going to take more time. So yeah, there's definitely several different things that you can just kind of use the trap command to look for all of those signals, even if some of them aren't actually ever going to be sent, to run a script that way. And in the process of working on this, and this won't be a long rant, I promise, CentOS just once again shows how incredibly restrictive it can be as far as certain files just not having the right file permission, and thus just being disallowed from doing anything they should be able to be allowed to do. And that's not even scripts and things that I'm making. Like the log rotation application that is, I assume, installed by default. I don't think I installed that extra. Even that had permissions that were just not set for CentOS 7. More and more, I really feel like the idiot path is to use CentOS unless you just want to bang your head against security enhanced Linux. There's not really any difference between CentOS and Debian based Linuxes on the core of them. Like slight program differences. The experience there, I think you'd pick up over the years very quickly. Over 2 or 3 years, you'd just be able to say, okay, well, in Debian you would use this program, but in Red Hat Linux versions, you use this program instead. But yeah, CentOS is just not supported that much. It's also the sucker's bet, because if you are potentially just working in a corporate environment and they have some kind of Red Hat Linux style of program that just you don't have the source code for, so you can't compile it for Debian, or there's some weird library that's not available on Debian, one or the other. If you literally can only install this one program on Red Hat, odds are that program probably also only runs on some extremely old version of a Red Hat based operating system. So even a new version of CentOS or Red Hat Enterprise Linux would potentially not be enough to make it work. But yeah, even if that was the case, using CentOS is just the wrong solution, because you might as well at that point have Red Hat Enterprise Linux and pay maybe $10,000 to $30,000 a year just to have a phone number to get tech support. Like, where if this is critical infrastructure stuff, that's what you really are paying for. It's like, you don't want to go the route that most people would go with Linux versions, where people would simply be totally willing to have weeks or months of downtime on a server because they're doing everything for free and as cheap as possible. Inherently, it is just CentOS only exists because there are cheap companies out there that want to pretend like they have Red Hat Enterprise Linux while not paying for it. And certainly I have heard IT people complain about paying for support on Red Hat. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. People don't want to pay for phone numbers, particularly if they think they're not using those support numbers that much. Most support services or warranty type services are bunk and not worth it. Particularly, I imagine if you do have a contract with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they probably don't refund you for downtime or pay you back if there's some major flaw. You've probably negotiated away all your rights. So I could certainly see that, but if you are going to run on free software, it makes so much more sense to be on the Debian branch, where all the individual consumers are also running that same software, and they can find the bugs, and they can add more support and add more coverage. Let's go ahead and ride this win and play again. Just being in a bigger community for open source software makes a lot of difference. And then there's Arch Linux, which I don't think I've seen a good argument yet to even try Arch Linux or any of the other flavors of Linux. BSD, same idea. It's like I've not really seen good answers there. As far as I see it, there really is either consumer use or enterprise server use for computers. That's pretty much where all uses break down. If somebody was going to, say, make a Bitcoin miner computer, there would probably be some custom Linux server around that, but that probably still would come down to being labeled a consumer use process, and probably still would be based on something like a Debian branch. So I don't see good arguments for there being more than two major branches, and frankly there probably should only be one major branch, which would be Debian based for Linux. There is also only taste preference reasons that Mac OS and Microsoft's Windows OS both exist. I definitely could see an argument to getting rid of probably Mac OS. Microsoft has too much legacy support, but Apple products don't have that legacy support anymore because they keep changing their operating system. So it is really just a visual preference. The thing that Microsoft probably should do is build up a war chest and release some options, some theme pack to Windows 10 to make it look severely like Windows, like Mac OS's operating system. Like, and just say, yes, this is for transitioning people who used to use macOS but now are coming over to the big boys table, as it were, this Thanksgiving, and they're gonna try a real operating system. Although at a certain level, real operating system just gets translated to bloated operating system in the minds of most Mac fanboys. But there's bloat certainly in Mac OS operating system too. The bloat might be more mental bloat in the fact that it is it is the same it's the mentality that comes around with how am I trying to say this?
Big trouble now.
Play my part.
Let's go ahead and evolve here.
Give me strength. I'll play my part.
Yeah. I don't know if I did anything else on my server. I tried to mount my still from like October 29th, trying to resilver old RAID array, and it threw errors and kernel panics like it had been doing. I'm just trying to see if I can get stability on the new stuff and on the new server, and frankly, at a certain point, I'm gonna probably just have to abandon any recovery attempts.
Looks like you've got another spirit.
Which would be about the second time, probably in the lifetime of me having computers, in which all the backups and all the files have been lost. But mostly I could probably rebuild a lot of it too, because it isn't like significantly large amounts of data that can't be reacquired, or things that can't be reacquired are not particularly important. They were just like Windows backups, like things that I probably would recognize as more important later on at some point, if I ever remember what I'm missing at all. It probably is very, very low important stuff.
Can I haunt you too?
Play my part. I knew this would happen.
But you know, making progress and moving forward would be nice to just kind of say you're done with that. There's still a lot of things on the server too, as far as the web hosting services I'd like to do. I did see an interesting thing, and I probably don't have anybody that would ever cooperate with me on this, where you could set up two routers with the DDWRT so that they both were running OpenVPN, and so they would create a virtual private network tunnel to connect the two across the internet. So in theory, any kind of services like shared folders and such would be shared amongst different people across the internet in different places. And you can have any number of internal services that you're not exposing to the then two internet connections. Forcecraft and Portalcraft. Alright, let's try Forcecraft. And that looked like an interesting idea, and it certainly there is always an idea about how many services do you want to put on the edge of your network on your router versus using OpenVPN and being theoretically capable of upgrading and perhaps strengthening the security of OpenVPN on as a server hosted behind the router. um, there's,
For me to prove
I
myself.
suppose, arguments both ways, and until you know where the actual vulnerabilities exist, there may not be a good answer one way or the other, because if there was a vulnerability in OpenVPN and it was on your router, then they get access to your router, which then probably would give them enough control to then get access to the rest of your network. But if they get access to your server, very possibly, the server has more important data, and there is a possibility that they may get access to your router, but then they may not be able to do too much to get to the rest of the network. And in both cases, the real solution is just to have the software be completely bug-free, which is never really going to happen, but what you would hope wouldn't be the case. I think I said that right. It's going to be not that long, but actually did turn into that long. A fairly long thing. Yeah, this week is going to be a weird week as far as me making coverage anyways. Streaming times certainly have shifted. And they really shouldn't have. So I'm waking up too late for the time that I really need to be waking up.
Help me, fairies.
So, you
But
saw through me.
if I'm going to be playing Disgaea, I'm going to just be playing Disgaea. I may very well try to play a different game in between. So let's start covering the news then. Here we have a game on Steam called Biosys Inc., which looks like it's a single screen game that then turns into, well, maybe multiple screens, or maybe the background just changes. It's early access for $4.99 English full audio. It seems like all you're doing is trying to like play some kind of puzzle game to make algae and different kinds of plant matter to potentially start the origins of life. But I think this is, if it is a true and accurate biology simulator, it looks pretty bad and boring. If it's claiming to be a true and accurate biology simulator and it's actually just garbage,
Just don't.
then
Let's play.
yeah, I don't, either way, I don't think I'd want to play it. So nothing there. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Steam's initial PlayStation 5 controller support doesn't include the controller's advanced haptics, which isn't super surprising. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a custom code to enable the use of the rumble. The trackpad should be fairly easy to do. The gyro support is going to be kind of hard to do. The rumble should be very easy to do. But that does open up a lot of possibilities of... Interesting. That still didn't trigger the second phase of that. Even though I think 4 cards were played in that turn. I guess summoning 2 fairies is not the same as playing 2 fairy cards. Inherently, that sounds like much more of a doom and gloom story than it really is, though, because all that really means is that there are, for the 0 games that are designed to actually use the tilt control and the touchpad on PC, it doesn't work. but there's actually very little
The only way out of the
game, very few games you'd even really want to play that take advantage of those style of features. As much as I may have enjoyed a game like Zack and Wiki that used the Wiimote to do a lot of its actions, the fact that a game like Zack and Wiki could not be played at all on PC never brought it to PC. And frankly, if I was to go back and play Zack and Wiki, or any of those Wiimote Waggle games, a second time, I would be significantly less impressed than they are. If anything, I'm surprised that there aren't just more TV remotes and floating mice that come with computers in general.
There you are, my little trespasser. Good eye.
There we go. Let's go ahead and evolve this and take some extra damage. Although, probably a bad time to evolve, because that's going to send its vengeance into active mode. Whereas if I just attacked him once, I could have started vengeance the next turn. Let's see. Tech Raptor has a article here. The Yakuza creator wants to do his own take on Sonic the Hedgehog, which, alright, by all means, give it to somebody. Anybody that wants to do a Sonic the Hedgehog game should be allowed to try it, better than the team that is working on it. Like, seriously, it would be very, very easy to fire everybody on Team Sonic, which I believe is the name of the team that makes most of the Sonic games, and just start over with scratch. I'm trying out a new thing with my plugin, the Great Suspender, which takes screenshots of the image. It's not particularly useful, and it's wasteful on resources, because it shows a screenshot, but then it still shows like a border, unlike what I was expecting, which is for it to just take a screenshot that is a 1-to-1 pixel representation of what it last saw, and then as it's secretly loading in the rest of the operating system, not the rest of the operating system, but the rest of the picture and the page, at that point, that's when you would it would hide the loading. That's exactly how a lot of the processes happen in Mac OS, is that they take screenshots of things and pretend like the page is loaded when it really hasn't. And it works very well, and I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft's operating system does some of that too. In fact, you can kind of even cheat there by having an overlay of a spinning beach ball or a spinning loading bar on top of a screenshot to make it look like the whole page is loading. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. A new Demon Souls door is puzzling players, which I'm not sure where the door is, or if it's back here, or if it's this glowing thing. What's behind the door number 1? So, apparently, they've added some contents to promote and convince people to play the... We'll just take that victory and play again. They've probably added more content to just get some more enthusiasm. Gamatsu has an article here. We had like basically no Gamatsu articles on Friday, and it wasn't... I went back and checked. It wasn't because there was no articles from Gamatsu. It was because there was no interesting articles from Gamatsu. They just didn't have anything new or different to say compared to what
Time for me to
Tech Raptor and Gamma Sutra had already said,
And I answered.
which maybe it was just a slow week, a slow couple days. But here's a Metroidvania style game called The Spirit of the Samurai has been announced. It's a Kickstarter campaign seeking $35,555 in funding, which that is a considerably small amount of money to ask for in a Kickstarter. Weirdly, I just saw an Atari logo, and I would say this, to me, feels like this may very well be a like Chinese game developer trying to get funding. Apparently playing as a ghost and a cat. That is not what I was expecting at all. That's a bit of a twist. Spirit of the Samurai. Yep. That definitely looks like a weirder game than what I was expecting. For sure. I've never seen this card back before. But yeah, that funding is suspect, to say the least. And I will say the game does not look like it's going to be super polished. It definitely feels like something where they already have developed something close to a low tier or mid tier game, and they're just looking for more money to either polish it some more, hopefully, or just to pay for the publishing fee and selling it, or just to get pre-sales, which we haven't seen too many examples of that happen lately, where Kickstarter was just used as a pre-order option. I don't think we're in a position where a lot of people want to pre-order games at the moment anyways. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Still Light, which is clearly a dark screenshot horror game that's labeled free early access, single and online co-op, English only. It's like absolutely nothing there. Okay. If you need to play 2 other cards, so I would need to do this first.
stay away.
Here we have a Gamma Sutra article. Zynga has opened up a Austin studio to work on a upcoming Star Wars project. Okay. Texas Studio is looking to make 25 new hires across a variety of roles. Will collaborate with Boss Alien on the Star Wars project, with the Brighton-based studio acting as lead developer. So they're a support studio that is being opened up and very possibly will be shut down. AAA console visuals and depths to multiple mobile platforms. So this is some mobile Star Wars game.
Let's play.
Let's see.
Don't hurt me.
I don't know how to
You're done for.
solve this issue other than just keep playing forward, I guess. Yeah. Opening up an Austin studio, Austin being a heavily taxed area in Texas, a heavily expensive area to live in for Texas, particularly when you take into account that significant portions of Texas live far, far below what the United States average poverty level probably is, and live very cheaply. There's a big danger in working a job like that to make a mobile game as a support developer and then getting shut down with no job security and then being stuck living in such an expensive area. However, that does not mean you shouldn't do it, because the truth of the matter is opportunity in the United States particularly is very, very centralized in the expensive, typically more liberal areas of the country. So if you live in Austin, worked at Zynga, got laid off, the opportunity to get another job, a better job, and maintain a healthy, thriving lifestyle in that environment is way higher than if you were to be living in some incredibly small city. For instance, like El Paso might be a good example of that, where although El Paso does have the ability to be somewhat close to other cities, there are plenty of cities in Texas and around the United States where you are in the middle of nowhere, and it would be an unrealistic 6-hour commute one way every day to get to a job. But yeah, so if you wanted to work in the video game industry and the Zynga office offered you a job, I'd say take it for sure. But also know that Austin is expensive. You're probably going to have to do a lot of the things that a lot of people in cities like that have to do, where you have 4 or 5 different roommates all living in perhaps a apartment that was designed to hold 2 or 3 people, or a small house, and you're going to have to live dirt poor while getting paid significant amounts. But in the long run, that still supports your career a lot better. Because you otherwise just go nowhere and get older every day. At least that's what I've figured from the whole experience. Certainly was a consideration when I was thinking about going to DigiPen in Redmond, Washington, which was a super expensive place to live, and a fairly expensive college for a video game college, but it also is the only place where you could potentially have worked for Nintendo of America, which probably means you wouldn't do much as far as actual programming, or Valve, which again probably means you wouldn't have done much in the form of actual programming. But there, at least particularly at that time, was not a lot of opportunity anywhere to be able to become a video game programmer. And even now there's significantly less than you would think opportunities to become a video game programmer in a traditional corporate path mentality. It's all very random and all very much about who you know, and a lot of indie developers who train themselves to program have as much, if not better, shots at succeeding than people who went to something like Full Sail or DigiPen. And we're starting to see more and more non-video game colleges offer video game programming courses and degrees, and there's a decent chance that those are all terrible, but it honestly doesn't matter that much. In a weird way, programming degrees are almost a experiment on, are you willing and capable of learning how to program, not actually going through the effects of actually learning how to program, because you will just be incredibly behind and uninformed day one at any job. And certainly a lot of programming jobs don't give employees enough time and enough credibility, enough reasonable time to catch up and learn the ropes as to how things are programmed in that specific office, in that specific job. But But ideally, hopefully, there would be some.
Whoa, you're strong.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little laid back, and I'm seeing the network is still having trouble. Again, man, I can't really do anything about the network. I think a lot of it has to do with timing. A lot of it has to do with just straight up, straight up, other situation, like everybody using the internet. I don't have anything running. I don't have the background music secret playlist playing. I don't have anything anything downloading or streaming. I was a little scared today because my TV, my brand new TV I just installed, was showing these black flickering lines that looked very much digital on the screen. But I think it's just because of my weird setup and the Sky being in full screen messed it up. I happened to need to install a new driver from NVIDIA anyway, so I installed the new visual driver and it fixed it. So ideally we won't see that. I won't see that again. Otherwise I might run into a scenario while I'm playing the Sky in particular where I am gonna have to reset the entire computer more often than I'd like. Moving on back to video game news, we have a Gamma Sutra article here. The new League of Legends character is not based on a real person. Where we see here long flowing pink hair and elf girl. I don't know who people think the Seraphine character is based off of. A former college student named Stephanie posted a Medium blog describing her relationship with a former Riot game employee that linked her to the creation of a new character named Seraphine. So, and so they're coming out and saying it's not based on this girl. Almost certainly, I would believe that it is based on that girl, but they don't want to pay any likeness royalties. And legally, due to recent rulings, as long as they don't say the character has the same name or is or has this or is any way implied to be the same person, they will get away with that, certainly. Because like latest rulings have said, if you draw a character or even trace a character to look exactly like a real human person, but you call it a different name and you don't do anything that would cause any kind of confusion, then you probably aren't going to win in a court case. I think that was Lindsay Lohan in like one of the Grand Theft Auto games.
Fear and despair are no match for me.
Okay.
No one gets past me. This is our way out. Too slow.
I'm a little surprised more to say League of Legends is still going on. And certainly I could make an argument that Riot Games, being a Chinese company, is just doing more shady Chinese things, but at that level I can only say, well, yeah, Riot Games is doing a slightly shady thing in the exact same way that Rockstar Games, a best described as Western company, does shady things. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see an increasing number of characters that share distinct appearances of character of people. But at a certain level, I also would say, once you get over that thought process, you realize that it's a pretty dumb thought process. There are some really recognizably beautiful people out there, celebrities and such. But those people are fairly few and far between, and we're running into a case where a lot of the actors and actresses and celebrities are just getting older and older, and a new generation of famous, good-looking people have not really risen up to replace them because the older celebrities have more power than they used to, and they've been able to hold on to power a lot easier than before. You only have to look as far as the Mission Impossible series to see that that's the case, where Tom Cruise should have long since introduced some younger people to replace him.
Watch me, Otohime. You'll never hurt Otohime.
But
Oh, the blueprints!
yeah. Yeah, but once you get past that point, once you realize, okay, maybe there's 3 or 4 really, really good-looking characters. Once you throw an animator and a creative person into that mix, in that conversation, you realize we could draw better-looking characters. Particularly in the fact that most video games have a completely different art style than hyper-realistic art style. I would definitely not want to see, like, Lara Croft as she's being depicted in her redrawn modern style. I don't want to see Lara Croft being replaced with Angelina Jolie as a character, and I don't want to really see him voiced by Angelina Jolie either. There really is a we can do better mentality that people need to embrace as far as visuals. And Sarah Finn from League of Legends, she looks very standard. But I think in League of Legends the characters are fairly zoomed out anyway, so that may be good enough. Anyways, speaking of good enough, here we have a game called Space Crash, where clearly the developers thought this was good enough, and I disagree. Free-to-play English game. Looks pretty bad as some kind of survival, as first-person shooter space game. Here we have a game called Dorian Morris Adventures, which almost seems like that would be Dorian Gray related, but I don't think it actually is. Not too many people named Dorian these days. It's a point-and-click adventure. It's $7.64. It's English and Polish. And since I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventures, I'll go ahead and put that on the fall list. Here we have a blog from Gamma Sutra. Deep dive, data deep dive. What's the long tail for Steam games? How month 1, year 1 money compares. This might be interesting if you're thinking about selling a game on Steam. I think, frankly, though, a lot of people that use Steam Direct don't even bother to read a single article or do any investigation or get any opinion or data whatsoever before listing their game for sale. There is clearly some level of a long tail by listing games on Steam, but I don't think it really is anywhere as high as you might think it is, or people might think it is. Particularly from my experience as somebody who looks at games like 6 months after they've come out to see if they even have 30 reviews, that probably equates to somewhere around 300 to maybe 600 sales for games that are even successful enough to be relevant. If you have 600 sales on a game that is $1, then you've got $600. Maybe you can multiply that by 5 to get like $3,000. Small amounts of money there when you think about it, particularly for the initial time investment to make a decent game. That's not to say there aren't games. There are quite a lot of games actually that hit it big and will have tens of thousands of reviews, which probably translates to hundreds of thousands of sales. And those games often are selling at like $20. So you may be talking a successful game may get $2 million, $3 million in gross revenue, if not a lot more. But I don't think that's the average. I don't think you can attribute any level of that success really to the fact that it's on Steam. You really probably only are going to get maybe a 50% boost in sales for listing on Steam as compared to trying to list your games on some other service. Let's see.
Doesn't this land just fill
Let's see.
You were done for.
in your own sense of justice to mine? Repent.
Can I haunt you too?
Next we have a game on Steam called Hero Soul, I Want to Be the Hero, which typically these titles that end I wanna something aren't, or I want to something tend not to be that good. And on first glance you might say this is an RPG Maker game, and it might be an RPG Maker game using a newer version of RPG Maker, but the video trailer actually manages to show some somewhat interesting gameplay. The graphics don't look particularly good or interesting, but where was it? I saw it. I swear I saw some gameplay in there. It must be here on this second video. But yeah, it does kind of have a like fast action RPG experience. They're not going into battle screens. It does kind of feel like a top-down Zelda game, which at a certain level that is probably what you would need. And then here we have a slime boss battle. So this is early access, $8.99 English full audio. Early access for a JRPG or an RPG in general doesn't make a lot of sense. So that is something to consider also. See. OpenCritic has an article. A new Mortal Kombat 11 trailer pits Rambo versus the Terminator. It's a new trailer for an old game in the sense that Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate is not a new game. For a brief second there, you could definitely have made the mistake, and I definitely did, to think that that maybe they had started putting out trailers for Mortal Kombat 12. Here you can see a great example, though, of old, like really old action actors in particular, not willing to step down, or the movie industry and themselves just not being able to find new action characters to play as. Here you have an extremely old looking Terminator character that I don't know if this is what he looks like in the most recent flopped Terminator movie. And here you have a incredibly touched up and way more muscly than he probably ever was Sylvester Stallone, I think Stallone is his name, Rainbow character. So yeah.
The real battle begins.
Although I guess also, if you want to be fair, in the whole Ronda Rousey attempt to have Ronda Rousey as as Sonya Blade, I believe, in Mortal Kombat 11 was also a major failure. But you can definitely see there is a significant amount of stunt casting, for lack of a better term, in Mortal Kombat 11 instead of trying to make a better game, or just realizing that maybe they should not actually be up to the 11th iteration of Mortal Kombat at this point, because the games don't change that much.
It is not my place to show mercy.
Okay.
Resign yourself.
Cave in?
Let us conclude. Can I haunt you too?
Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam here called The Adventurer Episode 2 New Dreams, and this looks like a kind of cell phone RPG game, which weird combination of what looks kind of like a visual novel in the front of it, but if this character all in black is supposed to be this character in this chibi form, and this character with the purple hair is supposed to be this character, then that is almost no connection whatsoever. Feels like they merged two very different art assets together. You also see it here in this case, where you're seeing this like fairly well drawn fantasy Cerberus like monster creature, and then in the chibi form it looks absolutely nothing like that. This is 99 cents English. I just don't think there's enough polish there. Rush to all other characters. That.
Cave in?
And that.
Can I haunt you
And
too?
that. And that. G4 TV started tweeting again. So 5 hours ago, they did Ron Funches just commit us to a G4 reunion special. Ron Funches being a True TV actor, I guess. I don't even know who he is, really. See, more and more I still kind of wonder if this whole thing is a is just employees of G4 going crazy, having nothing better to do, and trying to will G4 into existence. I also wouldn't be surprised if this actually a G4 holiday reunion special might be all that this really is this like reunion special between different people.
May you rest in peace.
And of course I'm not listening to the audio. I could be listening to the audio, but that would be incredibly distracting, and I'm already too easily distracted. A lot of that, certainly, a lot of the comedy here around G4, as they're just showing more and more clips, is of a time and place, and I don't know if that's something that's really going to work.
Literally.
I wouldn't be surprised if G4 though really is just gonna be reruns. And then there's this tweet where they listed job listings on September 4th, and they've been quiet between then. and July the 31st. They've been quiet before that. And then July 30th, July 27th, July 24th. And it was when it started, this whole idea that G4 might be coming back. Although, I still wouldn't be surprised if it is just all reruns. Just all reruns of old shows. Somebody got the rights to G4. Somebody's going to put it on Facebook, or maybe they can put the reruns on a channel. It is fairly crazy, in all fairness, that the content that was on G4 didn't get rerun to death on some third-rate cable network channel. In almost every other instance of any other channel failing if there was any level of fandom at all, that content would get rerun. Although some content certainly is just so incredibly dated, or it just has so little bit of a reach that there's no way anybody would show it instead of showing like a rerun of Seinfeld or something else that would get more views. It's a little surprising when you see things like Adult Swim happen and they publish their own content when they could probably get more views running reruns of some other content, but they are also desperate to justify their own existence, so that's why they do that. Moving on, Take Raptor has an article. Trine 4 DLC Melody of Mystery announced. Trine 4 I think was a decent Trine, unlike Trine 3, but I still haven't gotten around to playing any of the Trine games, and it still feels like they are probably trying to move a little too fast as far as making more content. 6-level story campaign DLC. Yeah, if that's like $2, that would be fine. But if that's like a $5 game piece of DLC, then you're paying quite a lot for each level. Which, yeah, there's definitely problems there. Wanted to mention two things. One, I redid my uBlock Origin cosmetic filters so that the logos now show. That should also center the pages on tweets a little bit more to the center. And two, apparently macOS users are having crashes on Big Sur when using the browser source. While this does not appear to affect all users, we do not recommend upgrading to Big Sur until we are able to release a fix. I tested out this virtual camera feature that they introduced too. It's an interesting idea. I don't know if it particularly is useful for most people, because all you're effectively doing is streaming your video, whatever finalized video you have, on one computer potentially to another computer, or you could run a different instance on your computer, but then there's really no reason for that at all. That would just be overly complicated solutions in most cases. GitHub has come out and said they're going to stand up for developers. YouTube-DL is back. This was the one that the DMCA, the recording industry, the RIAA, used the Digital Millennium Copyright Act law to try and take it down. So they're going to stand behind it, which this is really a great sign for GitHub in particular. GitHub, I believe, is owned by Microsoft now, which at a certain point that's going to be the truth in almost every scenario. But yeah, there's this is a great sign for GitHub, because I imagine GitHub has not had too many Digital Millennium Copyright Act claims put on its open source software. And if the claims were made, they almost always, I imagine, were at least fairly legitimate sounding. Where the RIAA is trying to destroy software that's all already available and installed on billions of machines, I'm sure, just because they don't like it, and because they are just inherently always trying to use the law as a bludgeoning tool and to their benefit. Next we have a Gamma Sutra article. Capcom says personal details of 350,000 potentially compromised after a recent hack. Which I swear we heard this article. Yeah, here he says, earlier this month, the Resident Evil Monster developer explained that an unauthorized third party had access to its internal system, but at that time they said there was no evidence that any customer information had been breached. This is your standard method of operation for almost every company, is that they've been breached. They know from day one that customer information has probably been stolen, and then they just slow roll it because the lawyers tell them to, or because they don't want to be embarrassed. Or frankly, it might be something as basic as they kind of know that the first article on the story will get a lot more views than the second article in the story, so less people will be paying attention. But yeah, clearly they've come now and shown that there's actual people's data has been actually lost. I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and announce a even larger number later on.
Magic guns can be kind of finicky.
I don't think I'm gonna win here. Why not evolve more of this? Here we have a videogameschronicles.com article. THQ Nordic claims the Time Splitters 2 remake reference was a joke. When we are ready to talk about Time Splitters, we will make sure to get heard. Which, yeah, that sounds like they were either being crass or they were trying to get a Time Splitters 2 greenlit and failed miserably on it. One or the other. But the fandom for almost any series that isn't currently being developed on or published is usually 100% rabid and foaming at the mouth for new content and announcements of new games. So there literally is like no room to make that kind of joke for almost any game in existence. If you're going to make a joke like that, it has to be for something that is just so obviously the worst game ever. It has to be a joke for something like Duke Nukem Forever. If Gearbox made a joke saying Duke Nukem Forever has been greenlit, Duke Nukem Forever 2 has been greenlit, you could make that joke, but even in making that joke, you almost certainly have to at that point go and that greenlit has now been rescinded and the game has been canceled in the same breath, because you can't even leave people hanging. Perhaps we are at a point where comedy and jokes are just not acceptable as much as they used to be, but also there's a lot of just bad comedians out there, and they don't understand timing, and leaving people hanging with a implication that something might happen is not funny to anybody other than sadistic game developers, who certainly the game developers probably know that there was little chance of a Time Splitters 2 being made, but we live in a weird world where that definitely could be the case.
For me to prove myself.
Not getting very many victories again,
Come
which
on.
stinks because we're still trying to get the treasure chests. I do believe, as far as the weekly maximum amount of battle pass points that I could have gotten last week, I got like 2,000 out of 3,000. So you pretty much would have had to play every day. Perhaps not win any more than I did win last week, but play every day still to get the maximum amount of experience every week to get the battle pass up to however high it can get. Which, if there is a limit, there we know that it just can't go forever. Unlike Magic the Gathering Arena, where those battle passes were unlimited and you could theoretically play Magic Arena 24/7 in shifts with different people if you wanted to, and get that battle pass up higher. I don't know if that would have been the most efficient way to get you cards, but at least it was a possibility. I think we mentioned a couple days ago that Cyan asked people to make cakes in the form of the Mist Island, and he got a few receptions. Some of them were not of a Mist Island, or the Age of Mist, as they call it, as much as they were cakes of other regions. And you can certainly see that yes, you can make a cake, and if you have a decent amount of cake making skill to expert level of cake making and cake decorating skill, you can get somewhat decent replicas of the Mist Island. This seems to be fairly accurate in all depictions, but not particularly that impressive to me, actually. I'm not looking that in a form of amazement, and that certainly is the case that I have experienced with as far as cake decorating in general, because here we can see the process apparently as they're building it. Even the TV shows with the famous cake directors have to lose a lot of detail because they're using fondant, and they're relatively limited in the materials they can use, and you often have to, you could say, use molded chocolate, and you can see it's being squashed down by the weight. And here he's used what looks like sugar caramel for the trees. In a funny way, Lego is not incredibly different from playing with cake decorating, but I would say Lego does have that extra benefit of there not being really as much structural issues, but then most Lego falls under the category in which it can't do detailed angles, but you can do quite a lot with the variety of pieces available from Lego, so you can make a lot of things look fairly accurate. A Lego Mist Island probably would look a lot better than a Lego cake, but it's still, until you built something that is almost approaching a one-to-one scale of what the island would have looked like in the real world, you probably can't do all of the detail, and that's where you see a lot of micro scale Lego sets, and almost all sets are kind of minifig scale or micro scale, and both those kinds of sets have to get the general idea of what's going on, instead of
Let's play. Not one for pranks.
instead of trying to depict every single part. An example of that would be there was probably about 30 books in the bookshelf in the Mist library. Even at minifig scale, you would probably scale that down to a bunch of flat 2x1 tiles that are on their sides to look like probably, I'd say 15 books at most, probably less, probably 12.
Let's go to the ends of the earth.
And go.
Let's play.
The power of nature. You beckon.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Dino Hazard, which looks like an RPG game where you're also fighting a lot of dinosaurs, which at least you're doing something different here. This feels very Jurassic Park inspired as an RPG game. I really have to applaud this idea. They're calling it Cyberpunk, but whatever. Instead of just another fantasy RPG Maker game, Dino Hazard at least has a different environment. $9.99. By the way, I can see the beginning of the end of the news, so if I just manage to not waste a lot of time here, we will potentially be done fairly quickly. Even trying to win with Forestcraft these days is getting more difficult. RetroArch is now on itch.io, which is to say you can just download it from itch.io. And they've got their own little page. And I guess you can have collections on itch.io. But that really doesn't mean too much. You can also get it on Google Play. It's still in beta on Steam. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Fish and Groove, which is apparently a music game where you play a cat with a guitar and you're matching rhythms on 4 beats. Yeah. Even if you're playing like Guitar Hero, though, you do more than just press 4 buttons in time. There's several other actions that I'm not seeing actually available in this ripoff game. This is 89 cents English only. Yeah, it seems far too simplistic. Feels like a tech demo more than an actual game. And I think it's also definitely worth mentioning that that the what am I trying to say here? That even Guitar Hero is of limited appeal. There really isn't a lot of people these days that want to oops, sorry, hit my microphone. I keep doing that. They've soundproofed and foamed all of the outside, inside of the microphone thing, but they have just pure metal on the outside. And I probably need to get like something like a stocking or something, some kind of cloth fabric or just wrapping of some sort to make it so when you're touching it here when I'm just even slightly rubbing it, it translates to a lot of noise. The real solution would be, if I wasn't using a Blue Yeti microphone, would be to have a vibration mount, and that might be the next unnecessary upgrade that I put on my microphone, is just a vibration mount, so that then you can just bounce any part of the microphone stand and it won't affect the microphone at all. But that you would have to have a custom vibration mount, not just a standard one, because the Blue Yeti is such a weird shape. But I bet they make them.
Let's play. You're done for.
Here I also wanted to point out that it wasn't just one person that made a mist cake. Here we have a different person making a mist cake with several photos. See what happens when we click on a photo. Yeah, you can get a little bit bigger, but only kind of a limited depiction, and it's actually, they've made the artistic decision to not show the full island, but instead stop at halfway and then show a drawn, sketched out version of the
Help me, fairy.
um,
Bud, cut the rough stuff.
interesting.
One for praise.
I played wrong there. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if there ever was a point that indicated that you drew any kinds of maps or pictures of islands when creating them in the Mist universe. I think that's probably exactly the opposite of what you did. I think you always had to use words, and very special words and specific words in the Mist books to create the islands. And one kind of assumes that some of these structures on the Mist Islands are things that were man-made after the age themselves were created, but maybe not. Maybe there was literally no construction going on or changing of the environment going on. At a certain point, a lot of the Mist Ages do kind of feel like they were stationary, stagnant, dead points in time where no growth or change could ever happen.
Let's go to the ends of the earth.
Okay.
The power of nature.
This bears further study.
Here we have a game on Steam called Our Life Beginning and Always, which is tagged as a romance, relaxing LGBTQ+ visual novel game. Seems like there's a certain point here where the characters flash back, which is always a slightly dangerous situation, where here you have a much older version of that character here, and
I travel in search of the unknown.
then you have a weird character face generator, which means maybe you can make yourself look like whoever you want, but then you never get shown. If anything, it looks like these characters are getting particularly older, so seems like you might go through an entire lifetime. This is free to play, but then step 1 is $3.59, and then step 2 is another $3.59. So English full audio. Put this on the fall list, but I think there's probably some intentional like poor business practices as far as really selling the game for nearly $8, but then saying the game is free when it really isn't. And a decent chance, like any visual novel, that it actually is just a terrible game.
Let's play.
So that's another thing to certainly consider.
It won't be long now. So sparkly. Yeah.
This bears further study.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Shrimp, which looks like a game where you play as a shrimp. And generally speaking, I would call that just a low-effort joke game. And might even call it an asset flip, but I really want to know at what point did somebody bother to animate a shrimp, and what point were they really going to use that in the game. Doesn't look like it's particularly well animated. But by the looks of it, there is just kind of a generic lack of polish. So, yeah, I'd be hard-pressed to want to play a game where you're a shrimp. But in all fairness, I would say if some weird Japanese developer had made a game where you played as a shrimp, and they had put a lot of effort into it, and it was very visually polished, and it looked like it had an interesting story, then yeah, I could see myself being interested in that. But none of those things are the case here. So I'm gonna say no to that. Speaking of saying no to things, there's definitely some questions about whether there will be a big Black Friday style sale this year for Steam. And if there isn't, I think I'd be very happy to just say no to buying any games and maybe wait till a Christmas sale instead. It's not like I'm itching to get any new games really at all. Although once I start looking at the games, I probably would see a couple that would catch my attention. It's really just a great year to either catch up or work on your backlog. Here we have a game on Steam called Rgb Simulator, which seems to be just a asset flip of some kind of software you would use to test whether you want like a red tinted lighting source or whether you would like a blue or green tinted lighting source. $4.39, 22 achievements, are all numbers, English full audio. That is some of the worst quality games that we've seen in a while. Alright. Here we have The Guardian, and we don't cover that ever. They have this article from Oxford. Video games can benefit mental health. Now, this is a great title, feel-good news story to put out there. But I think in all forms of science and honesty, it is important to point out the truth of it. All the games they tested were Animal Crossing and Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville. Now, in all fairness, I will say the only thing negative you can say about Animal Crossing really is that it might be repetitive, grindy, and perhaps feed into people's obsessive behaviors of kids and people in general. Plants vs. Zombies, also repetitive, but also has microtransactions in it, so that was not a consideration either. What they didn't do here is a broad sample size of people who just play video games in general, or fully. I've yet to see like the full explanation on how they determined it was yeah, they're saying people who played more games tended to report greater well-being. Yeah, I think that's true. Like, I think that's a hard argument to say.
In the name of justice.
And perhaps this was one of those surveys where lots of different things were asked and questioned, but it could have also been a survey that had only like 2 or 3 questions. And so on a scale of 1 to 100, how well do you feel? How good do you feel? And then on a scale of 1 to 100, how many hours or do you play? Or like how many hours a week do you play in video games? There's some slight difference there. If I knew a survey was trying to determine whether video games were good, I very possibly might try to skew the results subconsciously or consciously to be more positive. A lot of these revelations are not revelations at all, because it really comes down to asking a very simple question, and the answer to that is the answer to pretty much everything else. And that simple question is, are you a normal human being in the society that you live in, or are you an outlier? And in almost every society in the world, playing video games is part of what the average normal human being experience is for almost every age group. And so if you're for some reason outside of the average there, you probably are not going to have as good of an experience in life as the average, because people tend to move towards what is good for them, what they want, what they need. Perhaps not always perfectly move to what they need, but generally speaking, people tend to move to what's good for them and away from what's bad for them. Sometimes that is because people are drinking alcohol or doing drugs and then killing themselves off, removing themselves from the general average society. But very few people are going to make the argument that a crackhead is actively and healthily engaging in average societal interactions. So yeah, what does that all really mean? It means if kids around you are playing Pokemon, you should let your kids, if you're a parent, play Pokemon, regardless of whether you like it or not. If you have kids and their peers are watching Cocomelon and you hate it, or if they're listening to Baby Shark every single day and you hate it, it's too bad. For the health of the child, you should be letting them have a normal, average life.
I suppose I've lost this one.
And anything short of trying to give your child a normal, average life in almost every scenario is a level of selfishness on the form of a parent. And let's face it is parents that are going to be making these decisions about whether kids should play games or not. Adults will have their own agency to make those decisions themselves. And I think there's not a significant number of adults out there that think video games are bad, for with the exception of like Joe Rogan, who seemingly, like, we won't get into that, but Joe Rogan's explanation for it seems to come from his own personal lack of ability to self-regulate, which I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of that in Joe Rogan's life and a lot of celebrities' life, where they just cannot time themselves and regulate themselves very well, and so they call things obsessive and bad for everybody when it might just be bad for you. Let's see. I guess we'll try another Havencraft since we just won. But yeah, wanting your child to be outside the norm is not good. Like, you want your children to succeed and you want to support them, but as far as what you bring to the table, it should be stability and averageness. If your child, for instance, started to show aptitude in playing a sport, let's say soccer, you give them the average. You give a child the average experience of being on a soccer team, and if they start being really good, you support them. And if they say they still want to do it every year after year, you support them and you let them keep playing. And if they start getting really good and winning tournaments, you support them. But at no point do you bring anything new to the table there, or should you bring anything new to the table. You gave them the average, which was almost, well, a significant portion of people play soccer at some point, either on a summer team or just play soccer in general. Then it's all based on the motivation and the level of success that the child brings to the table after that point. Maybe every now and then you might give them a pep talk, but you got to be extremely careful on that too. You got to make sure that this is all about them succeeding and 0% about you living your life or your fantasies through your children. The same is true for education. You want to give them an average education, even if in your area, in your school system, the average education is pretty poor. You don't want to become a tiger mom or a tiger dad and push the kids to take extra classes and hire them tutors and have them study insane amounts of time and go to extra education unless they have like a learning deficiency and are falling behind. That's a different situation. The Japanese are particularly bad in that case of pushing their kids to get the best perfect scores they can possibly get, which just causes an incredible amount of stress and pressure, and causes a incredible amount of suicides that happen that are severely, in my opinion, underreported in Japan. Which it does you no good to have a child who is successful in sport or academics or anything else and have them, because of the effort to reach that goal, also inevitably turn out to be completely socially, emotionally, possibly physically broken. That's not what you want for your child. You don't want them to be just good at one thing and horribly terrible at everything else. Let's see.
My sword serves as a powerful talisman.
Do we want to evolve? Yeah, if we evolve this one, you'll have Bane.
In the gods I trust, cleft in twain.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Castle Grimholt, which looks like an RPG game. Again, maybe not made with RPG Maker. Pixel graphics are calling it Souls-like. It's $8.99 English only. It's a little expensive, maybe 50 cents more expensive than I'd like to pay for a game that looks like this. but I'll put it on the following list and we'll see. Of course, it could be nothing. Next, we have a game on Steam called Forgotten Soundscape, which seems to be just audio files that play with some asset flipped 3D models. You mix the soundscape and music a simple way. $3.49, English only. Yeah, I don't think there's a game there. Another concession.
You will be freed from suffering.
Sweet. See what do we need now. Still need one more Havencraft. We would need 2 more Portalcraft. Or Forestcraft. Next we have a game called Simulators 2021, which is just asset flips. One of the characters is like a naked mannequin character sitting on a toilet, so I'm not sure I really want to bother to show it. Yeah. It's selling itself for $1.99 as English and Chinese. It's definitely a low effort garbage game. I suppose it is also worth mentioning back in the Oxford thing is the real question certainly is, what is the worst case scenario that could possibly happen for kids or adults playing games? You need to get some of those outliers and do some research on the outliers. Are the people who are playing the sex games, the adults who are playing the Japanese sex games or the adult sex games in general, what is their lifestyle like? Have they been, is there any example of anyone who plays those inherently on a weekly basis, on a daily basis? Is there any example of any of them not being incredibly lonely or incredibly pathetic in some other way? Or what is the example of, which is probably more relevant, of the people who are playing just Call of Duty every day or just Madden? Because that's a heavy percentage of the gamer bros players, and so you kind of need to do the breakdown there and not so much focus on how much does it affect children to play games, because children have a tightly scheduled structure and lifestyle usually. They have to go to school, that they're often forced to go to other activities, many other activities, through school and through parents. But a adult that literally can just play Madden and go to work, or maybe not even work at all and just play Madden, or just plays a bunch of Call of Duty, or just plays first-person shooters, or just plays wrestling games, those are the more obsessive personalities that are probably in the danger zone of having video games be a contributing factor or symptom of other issues. I imagine there are also several people with like autism and other actual disabilities, kids or adults, who probably play games because they're just obsessive on it, and it's one of the few things they can do. At a certain level, there might be people that are so disabled that all they can do is play video games, and they just physically or mentally are not capable of doing other activities. And so that should be a consideration too. There's a lot of different scenarios that need to be mentioned and investigated more on surveys like that. And particularly in the case that you have often tabloid journalists try to report on stories of kids obsessed with video games, and they do it in a very unscientific, unethical way because they have the answer that they want to get before they even interviewed or had any subjects to talk about.
So, this is my fate after all.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called The Last Wulin, which looks like a low-effort Chinese simulator, maybe RPG game. $4.99, English and Chinese. This is one of the problems with Disgaea 1 also. Disgaea PC is that there's a lot of menus and a lot of RPG elements, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is something that I'm gonna have to deal with. You know, when playing an RPG, is that you might, particularly a RPG like Disgaea PC, which is not a particularly new RPG, so it's missing a lot of the optimizations you would expect to see in more modern RPG games, action RPG games. But even the most modern games still have armor and stats and things like that, and they just have better optimizations on how the menus work and how efficient or how often you have to look at stats. And Borderlands is kind of a great example of that, where all the guns have stats, but in reality you probably don't have to look at any of the gun stats, and you can just play with whatever you want, whatever you picked up latest, and you'd be fine. Okay. If I play that, I can't really do anything, so I need to probably play that. Then evolve that.
Real battle begins. In the gods I trust, cleft in twain.
Do that. And then do that.
Harken the voice of divine
The
will.
wrong forest, friend. Pounce!
Next, we have a game on Steam called International Tennis Open, which looks to me like it's a tennis game from 1994. Wonder what it originally was on. See, this is kind of the problem you would have. I almost wonder if it was on a Philips CDI, since this says Philips in the background. I wouldn't be surprised if actually this is a CDI game. But since this doesn't have the likes of like a Serena Williams tennis player, who's probably the only celebrity tennis player I can even name, there's very little reason why I'd want to go back and play an old tennis game. If I was going to play any tennis game, it would certainly be a Mario tennis game, or maybe, was there a Samba de Amigo tennis game that was good, maybe? Like Sega Tennis, I think. This game was originally released on the CDI, Mac, and PC formats in the mid-90s. Well, it is interesting to see CDI games potentially getting re-released, but that doesn't really give it relevancy, considering how incredibly irrelevant the Philips CDI was in general. Let's see.
I swore the skies in the name of justice.
And this.
Punishment.
And end the turn. If I can make it one turn, I can possibly win, but I don't think I will.
Stop!
Yep, I've lost. Next, we have a game on Steam called Super Ultimatum Quiz, which Ultimatum sounds like is a threat, so I think this person probably doesn't speak English.
Everyone.
Justice does not hide in the
And then they have Niger here as one of the answers,
I
which is spelled exactly the same way as the N word, so that feels like a troll. 59 cents English only. Definitely low effort at that, at least. Alright, well, I may have to play a little off screen to try and get one more victory, but I'll give it one more game, but then that's going to be it. Like one more, just Havencraft. Hope for a quick disconnect. Gamatsu has an article here. Fault milestone 2 side above the 2 side : above for the Switch launches December 3rd, which this is getting to be one of those ridiculous Japanese title games,
They're all you know?
which I'm
I
not
guess
even
you're looking for
sure
a fight.
what kind of game it is. Is it an RPG or is it just a visual novel? It's a visual novel. Okay, that would explain the animation and only animation. Which, and a lot of times, the trailers for visual novels might be the best parts visually of a visual novel. Here we have a game on Steam called This Is My Dungeon. And so it's like a tiny tower but upside down, which I guess you would probably make an equation to something like Fallout Shelter. Although Fallout Shelter has kind of expanded from that idea. It doesn't really look anything like Dungeon Master though. Although clearly they've put Dungeon Master in capitals here. So if you search for Dungeon Master, you'll see this. $9.59. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it has anything interesting on it. It's $9.59. It's English, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Yeah, the monsters don't look particularly interesting. I would love to play Dungeon Master at some point, but frankly, it needs a remake. Like, not even a remaster. You can remaster it fine and just make sure it plays well, which I think is, in its current state, it probably doesn't play well on Windows 10. But a full remake is what really should happen. And there's seems to be little chance that that will happen. Let's see. This and this. Next, we have a game on Steam called Pocket Penguin, a Game Boy style adventure, and definitely it looks like a Game Boy game, like Kirby. Yeah. $12.74. We're getting to the point where these Game Boy retro looking games are getting more expensive than even an average game. English full audio, third party EULA. No to that for me. Yeah. I'm increasingly confused as to why there's a growing fandom of nostalgic people for Game Boy. In particular, it just does not make any sense to me. TechRaptor has an article here. Good Old Games is holding a major sale on Polish titles, which at a certain level, since CD Projekt Red is a Polish company and they are the parent company of Good Old Games, at a certain level this is an example of Good Old Games just holding a sale to sell their own games, and including a small group of other people, which I suppose in a certain level Steam probably does have its own sales for Steam projects, but they don't make big store-wide sales for Steam products. They just have a bundle for all Valve products. So yeah, but favoritism of yourself does not look great when trying to run a storefront and convince other publishers and other developers to do business with you. It would be the equivalent if the Epic Games Store was constantly promoting Fortnite over every single other game on the storefront, which at some level it might be doing that and people just haven't recognized it. It definitely is not hard to find Fortnite. And at a certain level, only at the point where Fortnite stops becoming popular does there become a legitimate argument to say that they're promoting Fortnite even though it's not popular, because the argument right now could easily be made that Fortnite is coming to the top of the recommendation lists on the Epic Games Store simply because Fortnite is the most popular game on the storefront. Well, there was an attempt there. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Rule Number 1. And while I do like this cyberpunk anime robot girl with metal bra and nothing else, looking at the actual game, it does feel like it is probably just an asset flip, low effort first person shooter game. Yeah, and you've got bra and panty zombies chasing after you. Early access, $4.99 English. Yeah, no to that. That seems just like it's trying to pander. Speaking of pandering, TechRaptor has a new article for Nutaku's latest game called Angry Bangers, I believe is the name. Bangers. It's a tactical XCOM game by the looks of it, where you place different characters. Half of these games are really just low effort games that have had their art changed slightly to have naked ladies in it, and that's about it. I can now fully attest I'm very, very close to completing everything available on College Days through the help of cheating a lot. And they are approaching a full month of not having updated it at all. They said that there was a sale that was going to end at the end of September. We are halfway through November, and that sale is still going on. No new content has been added. Nothing's been said. And College Days is like the 5th most recent game from Nutaku. So it does definitely feel like there's a case where a lot of these games get pushed out in the hopes that people will spend a ton of money in the first 6 weeks and then they're immediately abandoned. Which on a certain level, that's, since Nutaku is owned by Pornhub, that's the Pornhub market too, is that it is just kind of like this YouTube where people can put up videos, and the videos are fairly irrelevant after the first 24-48 hours, unless it gets really, really popular, and then maybe it gets recommended back to people. But that's certainly no way you'd want to see any business run. I wouldn't want to see a new AAA game come out every day or every few hours on Steam, and I wouldn't want to see good AAA games get lost in the shuffle if every 24 hours. Moving on, here is a non-good game called Untitled Space Game. Not only is it a space game, which is not what I want, it looks like it is just a vector art asteroids game for $1.69. Nothing there of interest. Let's see. On top of the mist cakes, Punished Props also made a mist book, and in this case they've got a touch screen on it where you can play Real Mist 3D, which, yeah, okay. they sold a collector's edition that did basically that already, except for it was just playing a looped video. It was kind of ridiculous even in that collector's edition for the price of it, that it wasn't just a Raspberry Pi playing with a touchscreen, which almost certainly that's what this is. Of course, nobody really wants to play Myst on a tiny touchscreen on a book. It is a visual gag, and it looping through video is really all that visual gag is worth it. It's really worth. Here, Gamasutra has a job listing for a gameplay engineer for that game company. This was the developers of Journey, Flower, Flow, and the most recent game they're working on, Sky, which they probably do need a gameplay engineer because none of those games actually had gameplay in them. Journey had some jumping and walking, and that was about it. Flower and Flow barely even had that much. That game company is definitely too artsy for its own good, and should consider really investing in making a real game. After Journey, in particular, should have been the point where they should have made a real game instead of making artsy projects. Here we have a game on Steam called Beatles, which they say is from 2020. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 5-year-old game. Looks like it's sort of a bugs tower defense maybe type game. They're calling it an open world shooter. It doesn't look polished enough, or like it has that much interesting. Living on a world full of bugs might be interesting, but I don't know. This is $1.19, bunch of languages. It's also being bundled with Hentai Shadow and Hentai Minesweeper and Hentai World. So it's like, clearly, you know, this is a low effort game developer, Skitor Games, and they're self-publishing. And there, once again, every time you see games like that, you have to ask, why does Valve tolerate this? Why do they not curate to even a small amount with these low effort games? Maybe they do. Maybe they curate a lot, and these are just the ones that leak through. But if that's the case, then they have the perfect argument to get rid of Steam Direct and say, no, we're not going to do Steam Direct in the way we're doing it, or at all, because all we're getting is a bunch of terrible games. Here we have a game on Steam called Rollerball, which doesn't look like there's enough of an experience here that I'd want to play. And I'm not fully getting the overemphasis on dressing up the roller balls as different characters. $3.99 English, Polish, and Russian. No to that one. Next we have a game on Steam called Distorted, which is a dark screenshot horror game that shows us absolutely nothing for $3.59. So that can be easily dismissed. 2 more tabs. Next we have a game called Zibalba, I'm gonna say, which looks like it's a dungeon crawling first person shooter. Looks a little rough visually. Looks like it might be a little bit asset flippy in the enemy design. $7.99 English only. At the core of it, though, I'm not seeing a game here. This just kind of feels like it's an attempt at something like a Doom ripoff. Doing it way worse than even Doom did. And Doom did it really well. I believe the Steam Fighting game sale is over. And I didn't do anything with that, which is fine. Like, me skipping a fighting game sale is about the best thought possible. So then that brings me to the Humble Bundle store. Let's see if there's any new Humble Bundles worth talking about. Nope. There's a book bundle called Be the Change, supporting the LAA, the ALA, the American Library Association, apparently. Which seems to be trying to promote the idea of getting more books of African nature or African American nature in libraries, which, in all fairness, there probably is room for more books from more diverse writers. Novelists in general and people who tend to write books are somewhat self-segregating, and that is an issue. Let's see, Twitch support has this thing we should talk about that they've just announced. I'm on my Twitter feed. My Gamma Sutra says Microsoft expects the Xbox Series X and S to be in short supply until after the holidays. Okay. The reunion special is going to be hosted by Run Functions, with the original cast of G4 and more. I don't know how many of that is. He's going to be, interestingly, at YouTube and something called /G4 TV. So I guess that's YouTube /G4 TV as a YouTube channel at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And let's just show the picture here instead of talk about it. But then it's also going to be on the Sci-Fi channel, which I'm not sure there ever really was a connection between the Sci-Fi channel and the G4 Tech TV group. But they're going to play it almost as a rerun at midnight on TV, which they don't really have anything. Actually, Sci-Fi does have like a midnight series that they've been trying to promote at midnight, where it takes every letter in Sci-Fi and it adds it. So it's something called like T, Z, G, Z, or something like that is their midnight Adult Swim equivalent. So yeah, at the moment with this reunion special, it seems to me like there's a YouTube channel called G4 TV that's coming out, and maybe they can get some time slots on Sci-Fi channel, but they are far from a point where they are going to announce an actual TV channel. And it's weird to particularly tease that and not have any information. When there really should have been more information. CNBC has an article that was retweeted. I actually blocked the part on Twitter that tells me who retweets what, because that's irrelevant information to me. But it's Microsoft looks beyond the console wars as it releases new Xboxes. Which, yeah, that's pretty much interesting. TechRaptor has an article here. I'll just read this. Fuser implements tough policies on streaming as the RIA and Twitch face off. Which, okay. Yeah, I think that's going to be the problem with streaming almost any music game. And that definitely has been a consideration as to why I have not ever wanted to play music games. That and the fact that I am also not very musically inclined. But yeah. So that's all the new news. Devil May Cry 5 Spite Edition has been made by PC modders. So what is the Spite Edition? It looks to fulfill the promises of the special edition for PC players of the game. The mod already has a trailer promising one of those features already, the legendary Dark Knights mode, as the first announced included mod. Okay. The legendary dark mode is basically a mode of play in Devil May Cry that allows double the number of enemies on screen at once, offering more combat and combo opportunities and higher difficulty. See, and that's not inherently what I would want to see in a mod, that particularly one that may get taken down. Like, what I would want to see is them getting rid of all the red orbs and just improving any performance issues if there are performance issues, and just trying to achieve parity with the other games if there is a lack of parity. I don't really want anything else changed with Devil May Cry, because I would want to play it just the way it was created, warts and all, with the slight exception of the obvious wart, the giant tumor that is the red orbs and the greediness of the original game creators. And then TechRaptor has this article, multiplayer ads. Multiplayer ads are a new type of interactive video and currently in closed beta. When you run a multiplayer ad on your channel, many of your viewers will watch the same ad at the same time. As part of the shared experience afterward, these viewers will be able to vote in real-time interactive polls. Yeah, this sounds like utter crap to start with. The number one most annoying part about me having customized ads enabled it once again on my YouTube channel is that they ask all these YouTube survey polls. Also, YouTube's algorithm as far as recommending videos has just gotten incredibly useless at this point. It's not suggesting anything new at all. Anything. Nothing on the watch later list is getting really suggested. Nothing that I'm subscribed to is getting suggested on the home page. It's just trying to push me to 3 or 4 channels of where I may have watched 1 or 2 videos of these creators, or maybe not watched any videos of these creators, and they totally don't want me watching the things I want to watch on YouTube. It's ridiculous. Twitch will reward bits to the creator, and there will be special channel celebrations. So inherently, this is going to be, I'm going to run this multiplayer ad now. Fans, everybody please watch the ad at the same time and then fill out the survey because it will give me money back. I don't think for a second that's what anybody wants. Apparently, there's also there's an example here where, what's your favorite Twitch gift card? That's ridiculous. I didn't even know Twitch had gift cards. And then it gave him like 500 bits, which is probably nothing. Encourage them to watch and vote in the poll. Each vote in the poll rewards bits to the creator. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like garbage. And that totally is not what Twitch should be focusing on. That they should be all hands on deck with copyright programming and dealing with the copyright DMCA claims and nothing else. Alright, well, there's nothing else more to say. I suppose I have some missions that I theoretically need to get done, and then I have more Disgaea to play, more than one episode. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can support me by friending me on Steam and gifting me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.